President Trump has used his wide-ranging speech at the UN General Assembly to accuse the UN of financing immigration, which he's described as an assault on Western countries. During his nearly hour-long speech, Donald Trump decried what he called the failed experiment of open borders and told listening world leaders, "Your countries are going to hell."
Every year when world leaders gather at the United Nations, the speeches they deliver are more than just words. They become signals of policy, power, and perspective. Among these, one address in particular drew extraordinary attention. Former U.S. President Donald Trump, standing before the international community, delivered a speech that cut through the usual diplomatic language with sharp critiques and bold assertions. He didn't shy away from difficult topics. Instead, he took aim directly at some of the most debated issues of our time: uncontrolled migration, the global push for green energy, and the inability of powerful institutions to bring wars to an end. His words echoed far beyond the UN hall, sparking conversations about sovereignty, national identity, and the very future of international cooperation. What made this speech so gripping was not only the topics Trump chose, but the way he framed them, as challenges to national strength, as consequences of misplaced global priorities, and as reminders that nations, in his view, must always put their sovereignty first. In this video, we will unpack Trump's UN speech in detail. We'll examine how he approached migration, energy, and war, and explore what his words might mean for both America and the wider international stage. Trump's stage presence and key themes. When Trump takes the stage at a global forum, his presence is rarely understated. Known for his direct style, he once again opted for strong, straightforward language. His speech was not an exercise in subtle diplomacy. Rather, it was a bold articulation of views that continue to resonate with his supporters and challenge his critics. Unlike many leaders who favor cautious wording, Trump leaned into a confident and assertive delivery, ensuring his message was clear, memorable, and impossible to ignore. The key themes of the speech revolved around three main pillars. First, a firm stance on migration, which he framed as a pressing security and cultural issue. Second, a sharp critique of green energy policies and the international focus on climate change. And third, a lament on the failures of global efforts to bring an end to ongoing wars, particularly highlighting the limitations of the United Nations in resolving conflicts. Underlying all of these topics was a familiar refrain in Trump's rhetoric: the primacy of national sovereignty and the importance of strong states defending their own interests rather than being bound by international obligations that may not align with domestic priorities. This overarching philosophy created a consistent thread that connected migration, energy, and war into one cohesive argument. Migration, a central focus of the speech. Migration has always been one of Trump's defining issues, and it was no surprise that he made it a centerpiece of his UN remarks. He painted a picture of uncontrolled movement across borders as a danger, not just to the United States, but to many nations worldwide. According to Trump, migration in large, unmanaged flows threatens national security, weakens cultural identity, and burdens social and economic systems. He emphasized that countries should have the unquestioned right to secure their borders and determine who enters. Trump argued that while compassion is important, uncontrolled migration can destabilize societies. This framing aligns with his long-standing belief that strong borders are the foundation of strong nations. In his words, migration policies should reflect the will of a nation's citizens, not external pressures or humanitarian impulses that fail to consider long-term consequences. By placing migration at the center of his speech, Trump was not only revisiting a signature theme of his political identity, but also challenging the international community's approach. He suggested that global compacts and multilateral agreements on migration dilute national sovereignty and encourage policies that may not be sustainable. His message was clear: each nation must be free to set its own course when it comes to who enters and who stays. Green energy and climate change critique. From migration, Trump pivoted to climate and energy policies, delivering some of his strongest criticisms. He argued that the global push for green energy has often been pursued without regard for economic realities and national competitiveness. In his view, renewable energy projects and climate-focused regulations frequently impose high costs on businesses and consumers, while offering uncertain returns in terms of environmental benefits. Trump portrayed green energy not only as economically impractical in certain contexts, but also as a policy area where international pressure often undermines national decision-making. He claimed that countries should not be forced into adopting strategies that weaken their industries or compromise their energy independence. Instead, he championed a model where each nation decides how best to balance economic growth, environmental stewardship, and energy security. The critique resonated with a broader argument that Trump has often made, that international agreements on climate, such as the Paris Accord, are unfair to the United States and other industrial powers that bear heavier costs while competitors exploit loopholes. By highlighting this point, Trump positioned himself against what he called globalist approaches, insisting instead that each nation must weigh its own needs before committing to global targets. The war in Ukraine, a shift in stance. Perhaps the most globally sensitive part of the speech was Trump's remarks on the war in Ukraine. He criticized the inability of international institutions, including the United Nations, to bring an end to the conflict. While he did not offer a fully detailed plan, he suggested that leadership and decisive negotiation are lacking on the global stage. Trump framed the Ukraine war not only as a humanitarian tragedy, but also as a symptom of larger failures in global diplomacy. He criticized prolonged commitments that lead to endless support without clear resolutions. One of the more philosophical parts of Trump's address touched on the importance of free speech and the right of nations to determine their own path without interference. He warned against the dangers of what he described as a homogenized global agenda that undermines the cultural, political, and economic diversity of nations. According to Trump, free speech is not only a domestic right, but also an international principle that should guide diplomacy and cooperation. He argued that countries should have the freedom to express their views, pursue their interests, and resist external pressures that seek to impose uniformity. Security, in this context, was presented as more than just military defense. It included the ability of a nation to preserve its identity, values, and systems of governance. Trump's emphasis on sovereignty once again tied all these threads together, making the case that strong nations, secure in their borders and free in their speech, are the foundation of a stable international order. Closing reflections: what the speech signals. As the speech drew to a close, Trump's core message was unmistakable. Nations must reclaim control over their borders, their energy policies, their trade, and their security. He painted a picture of a world where sovereignty is the organizing principle, rather than multilateral agreements and global institutions. For supporters, the speech was a reaffirmation of his commitment to nationalism, and a strong critique of what he sees as the failings of the international system. For critics, it raised concerns about whether such an approach undermines the cooperative spirit needed to address global challenges. What is undeniable is that Trump's words struck a chord. By focusing on issues like migration, green energy, and wars, he tapped into debates that remain unresolved and deeply relevant. His ability to tie these themes together under the banner of sovereignty ensured that his speech would resonate far beyond the walls of the UN. This was a speech that stirred conversation across the world, regardless of one's political stance. It raised questions about migration, energy, war, and the role of international institutions. Questions that will continue to shape our global future. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the speeches, policies, and ideas that are shaping international politics. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe that sovereignty should be the guiding principle in today's interconnected world? Or do global challenges demand stronger cooperation between nations? Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more balanced, detailed coverage of global events.